Hey guys, Dr. Berg here. If you've been noticing weakness, fatigue, or shrinking muscle mass, especially in your legs, this video is for you. Today I'm going to talk about the one thing you should eat in the morning to stop that muscle loss dead in its tracks. Most people don't realize that muscle loss starts long before old age, and it has everything to do with what you're eating first thing in the day. So let's break it down in simple, practical terms, and I'll show you how to keep your legs strong, lean, and functional no matter your age. When people think about aging, they often imagine gray hair, wrinkles, or fatigue. But one of the first, most subtle, and often overlooked signs of aging is the gradual loss of muscle mass in the legs. This isn't just about aesthetics or appearance, it's a major health signal that something deeper is going on metabolically. The legs contain some of the largest and most metabolically active muscle groups in the body: the quadriceps, hamstrings, calves, and glutes. These muscles are not only responsible for strength and mobility, but also for maintaining insulin sensitivity, regulating blood sugar, and supporting metabolic health. So when these muscles start to shrink or weaken, it's more than just a loss of strength. It's a red flag for accelerated aging and potential insulin resistance. Muscle loss in the legs usually doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in slowly. First, you notice it's harder to climb stairs, or your legs tire out faster than they used to. Your walking speed may decrease, or you may begin to rely more on support when standing from a sitting position. Most people chalk this up to getting older, but in reality, it's often the early stages of sarcopenia, a condition defined by the progressive loss of skeletal muscle mass and function. And here's the critical connection. Sarcopenia is strongly associated with insulin resistance, which is a core factor in conditions like type 2 diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, and even Alzheimer's disease. When you consume a high-carb, high-sugar diet, especially over the course of many years, it forces your pancreas to release more and more insulin to manage rising blood sugar levels. Over time, your cells begin to resist the effects of insulin, meaning more insulin is required to do the same job. This chronic hyperinsulinemia, high insulin levels, not only leads to fat storage, especially around the midsection, but it also inhibits muscle growth and repair. Insulin, paradoxically, is both an anabolic hormone building tissue and a hormone that can block fat burning and promote muscle breakdown when it's chronically elevated. This sets the stage for muscle wasting, particularly in the lower body, where muscle mass is most critical for metabolic balance and mobility. What makes the legs particularly vulnerable is their distance from the heart and brain, two areas the body prioritizes during times of stress or nutrient deficiency. If your diet is lacking in essential amino acids, or your hormones are imbalanced, or you're under chronic stress, the body will begin to break down muscle in the legs to supply the amino acids it needs for more vital functions. This is especially common in people who eat high carbohydrate breakfasts like cereal, toast, or fruit juice, and skip out on high-quality protein and fat. Overnight, your body enters a mild fasting state, and if you don't break the fast with the right nutrients, it remains in a catabolic, muscle wasting state. Another major contributor to lower body muscle loss is lack of physical activity, specifically strength training. Sedentary lifestyles, desk jobs, and inactivity cause the large muscles in the legs to weaken over time. Without resistance or load, these muscles have no reason to grow or even maintain their size. Combine this with poor dietary habits, stress, low testosterone levels, and you've got the perfect storm for muscle degradation. As this continues, your basal metabolic rate, BMR, drops, your fat to muscle ratio increases, and insulin resistance worsens, even if your weight stays the same. And here's something that surprises most people. Muscle is a major glucose sink, meaning it helps pull sugar out of the bloodstream and use it for energy. The more lean muscle mass you have, especially in your legs, the better your insulin sensitivity. Lose that muscle and you lose that buffer. Blood sugar becomes harder to control, fat storage increases, and inflammation rises, all of which accelerate aging at the cellular level. Muscle loss in the legs is not just a cosmetic or functional issue. It's a deep systemic imbalance that reveals what's going on under the surface. Your mitochondria are struggling, your hormones are shifting, and your metabolism is heading toward dysfunction. That's why noticing early signs of leg muscle loss should never be ignored. If your legs feel weak, if you're losing balance, or if you're seeing less tone and more sagging around the thighs and calves, these could be subtle signs that your metabolism is under stress and your insulin signaling is breaking down. The problem is most people treat these symptoms as normal aging when in fact they are powerful indicators that the body is in a state of decline that can be reversed with the right dietary and lifestyle changes. Understanding this connection between leg muscle loss, insulin resistance, and aging is the first step to turning it all around and reclaiming your strength from the ground up. During the night while you sleep, your body undergoes a fascinating and complex series of hormonal and metabolic changes. One of the most important and often overlooked processes is that your body naturally enters a catabolic state. This means that instead of building tissue, your body is breaking it down. While some degree of catabolism is normal and even necessary for healing and renewal, the concern arises when this process begins to target lean muscle mass, especially skeletal muscle, like the ones found in your legs. The overnight fast, from the time you eat your last meal until your first meal the next day, can easily stretch from 10 to 14 hours depending on your eating habits. During this time, your body must find ways to maintain energy balance, repair tissue, regulate blood sugar, and support brain function, all without any new incoming nutrients. And this is where the muscle breakdown begins. As glycogen stores in the liver become depleted, typically after 8 to 12 hours without food, your body starts looking for alternative fuel sources to keep your blood sugar stable and your brain functioning. The first backup source it taps into is fat, which is ideal. But if your body is not fully fat adapted, meaning it's not efficient at burning fat for energy, then it will begin to break down amino acids from muscle tissue to produce glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. This process is especially problematic if you're consuming a high carbohydrate diet during the day because your body never becomes metabolically flexible. It depends so heavily on carbs that the moment glucose drops, it doesn't reach for fat. It reaches for protein stored in your muscles, especially in the lower body where the muscle mass is greater. This is the reason why so many people wake up feeling stiff, weak, or sore. It's not just aging, it's overnight muscle breakdown. Your body, in a desperate attempt to keep blood sugar levels in check, begins to cannibalize its own tissue, and the legs are a prime target. Your thighs, hamstrings, and calves hold a vast reservoir of amino acids, and they are easily broken down when cortisol, your body's main stress hormone, rises in the early morning hours. Cortisol plays a key role in waking you up, but it's also catabolic, meaning it promotes the breakdown of tissue for energy. This is why consistently high morning cortisol levels combined with poor nutrition and chronic stress can accelerate muscle loss over time. Additionally, if your diet lacks adequate protein, or if your first meal of the day is high in carbohydrates and low in essential amino acids, you do nothing to stop this catabolic cycle. In fact, you make it worse. Most people eat something like cereal, toast, or fruit in the morning, foods that spike insulin rapidly, leading to blood sugar crashes later in the day. But more importantly, they do not provide the building blocks your body needs to halt muscle breakdown and trigger anabolism, the process of rebuilding and repairing tissue. Without key amino acids, especially leucine, isoleucine, and valine, the three branch chain amino acids, your body continues to pull from its own reserves, further degrading your leg muscles, weakening your foundation, and decreasing your overall metabolic rate. This chronic overnight catabolic stress becomes even more damaging if you're over the age of 40. As you age, you naturally lose muscle mass and your ability to synthesize protein declines. Your body becomes less efficient at using dietary protein to stimulate muscle repair. This condition, known as anabolic resistance, means you need even more high-quality protein in the morning to counteract the muscle breakdown that occurred overnight. But if you skip breakfast, or worse, consume sugary foods, you end up pushing your body deeper into muscle-wasting territory. Over time, this leads to visible changes: shrinking thighs, sagging glutes, reduced strength, slower walking speeds, and invisible ones like reduced insulin sensitivity, increased inflammation, and a slower metabolism. Even people who exercise regularly are not immune to this if they're not fueling properly in the morning. Resistance training helps signal the body to maintain or grow muscle, but without the raw materials like amino acids and healthy fats, those signals are wasted. The body stays in a catabolic loop and the legs remain vulnerable. That's why what you eat in the morning is not just about calories, it's about signaling. Your first meal either tells your body to preserve and build muscle or to continue breaking it down for fuel. This signal becomes especially critical for people struggling with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or type 2 diabetes, as they are already in a state where muscle preservation is compromised and catabolic processes are amplified. What's more, people often make the mistake of thinking that only extreme fasting or calorie restriction leads to muscle loss. But the truth is, muscle loss happens subtly, silently, night after night, if you're not paying attention to your metabolic state and nutritional intake. The body's default response in a fasting state, especially in individuals who are not metabolically flexible, is to spare fat and burn muscle. This makes evolutionary sense as fat is a survival fuel, but in a modern lifestyle with poor dietary habits, chronic stress, and a sedentary routine, this adaptation becomes a major liability. The first meal you consume after waking, commonly referred to as breakfast, holds more power over your metabolism than most people realize. It is not just about breaking the overnight fast. It's a biological signal that tells your body what mode to operate in for the rest of the day. Depending on what you eat or don't eat, your body will either shift into a fat-burning, muscle-preserving state, or it will continue down the path of muscle catabolism and fat storage. Your cable to lose fat will increase the most. This pivotal moment is like a fork in the road. You can either activate systems that heal, strengthen, and regenerate your body, or you can unconsciously trigger systems that break it down. During the night, your body enters a fasting state, insulin levels drop, glucagon rises, growth hormone surges, and the body begins to burn stored fat for energy, assuming you're metabolically flexible. But by the time you wake up, your body is primed for a decision. It's looking for external input to determine what happens next. Should it continue burning fat and protecting lean muscle, or should it shift toward glucose metabolism, suppress fat burning, and potentially sacrifice muscle tissue to maintain energy balance? The answer depends on what you choose to eat as your first meal. If you begin your day with a high carbohydrate meal, such as cereal, pancakes, toast, fruit juice, or even so-called healthy oatmeal, you send a powerful message to your endocrine system. Spike insulin, prioritize glucose as your primary fuel source, shut down fat burning, and prepare for a blood sugar roller coaster. High insulin levels in the morning block lipolysis, the breakdown of fat for energy, and signal the body that external fuel is plentiful, so there's no need to access stored fat. But that's not all. When glucose enters the system without the presence of adequate protein and essential amino acids, the body still needs those amino acids for repair, enzyme production, neurotransmitter synthesis, and countless cellular processes. Where does it get them? From your own muscle tissue, especially in the lower body where muscle is abundant and readily catabolized under stress. This is why the typical modern breakfast is so damaging over time. You're not just losing the opportunity to burn fat, you're actively encouraging the body to break down its own lean mass. And this effect is magnified in individuals who are already dealing with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or metabolic syndrome. In those cases, insulin levels are often elevated even in the fasted state. So when a high-carb breakfast is introduced, it further pushes the body toward glucose dependency and deepens metabolic inflexibility. These individuals may find it nearly impossible to tap into fat stores, and muscle degradation becomes the body's backup plan for fueling basic functions. In contrast, when your first meal of the day is centered around high-quality protein, healthy fats, and is low in carbohydrates, you activate a completely different set of metabolic pathways. Protein stimulates the release of glucagon, which works in opposition to insulin and supports the continued mobilization of fat for energy. Certain amino acids, most notably leucine, trigger muscle protein synthesis, a process that tells the body to stop breaking down tissue and begin building it. Leucine acts almost like a molecular switch. Without it, your body lacks the signal to preserve muscle, no matter how much general protein you consume. That's why the type and quality of protein matters just as much as the quantity. Healthy fats in the morning, such as those from eggs, avocado, grass-fed butter, or MCT oil, further enhance your body's ability to burn fat and stabilize energy levels. They support ketone production, especially in low-carb conditions, and ketones themselves are muscle-sparing. Unlike glucose, ketones do not require insulin for entry into the cells, and they provide a steady, clean-burning source of energy for both the brain and muscles. This is one of the reasons why people following a ketogenic or low-carb, high-fat diet often report improved mental clarity, sustained energy, and less muscle fatigue during the day. Moreover, the hormonal impact of your first meal sets the tone for your entire day. A protein and fat-rich breakfast blunts cortisol spikes, supports dopamine production, which enhances focus and motivation, and stabilizes blood sugar, preventing the energy crashes and sugar cravings that often lead to poor dietary choices later in the day. On the flip side, a carbohydrate-heavy breakfast floods the system with insulin, causes a crash within hours, and sets off a chain reaction of cravings, hunger, irritability, and poor concentration. That hormonal seesaw not only affects your waistline and energy, it affects your body's ability to preserve lean tissue, especially in your legs, which are particularly sensitive to cortisol and insulin fluctuations. The unfortunate reality is that many people wake up already in a semi-catabolic state from the overnight fast and then unknowingly prolong that muscle wasting condition by eating the wrong type of breakfast or by skipping breakfast entirely and consuming their first meal as a carb-heavy lunch. Without the right signals, your body will continue breaking down tissue to meet its energetic demands, especially in a system that is already overburdened by inflammation, stress, poor sleep, and nutritional deficiencies. In the modern dietary landscape, breakfast has become one of the most misunderstood meals of the day. Despite being labeled the most important meal, it is often filled with foods that do more harm than good, especially when it comes to muscle preservation and metabolic health. Most people unknowingly start their day with a breakfast that is overwhelmingly high in carbohydrates and low in essential nutrients. Foods like sugary cereals, white toast, pancakes, waffles, bagels, muffins, flavored yogurts, granola bars, and fruit juices dominate the typical breakfast table. Even seemingly healthy options like oatmeal or whole grain toast, while better than ultra-processed choices, still fall into the high-carb category and often lack the necessary proteins and healthy fats to balance the hormonal impact of those carbohydrates. When you begin your day with a high-carb meal, the first and most immediate response is a rapid increase in blood glucose, which triggers a spike in insulin, the hormone responsible for transporting glucose into the cells. Now here's where the problem begins. Insulin is not just a storage hormone. It is also anti-lipolytic, meaning it shuts down fat burning. As insulin rises, your body halts the breakdown of fat for fuel, pushing you away from a fat-burning state. This alone might not sound alarming until you consider that many individuals, particularly those who are sedentary or insulin resistant, never fully transition back into fat-burning mode throughout the day. Their bodies remain in a glucose-dependent state, constantly craving more carbs to maintain energy. But what's even more concerning is that chronically elevated insulin levels, especially first thing in the morning, have been strongly associated with muscle protein breakdown, or what is known as muscle catabolism. This is especially true when the diet lacks sufficient protein and amino acids needed to signal muscle growth and repair. Without those anabolic triggers, insulin dominance doesn't just lead to fat gain, it leads to lean tissue loss, particularly in the legs where muscle mass is greatest. Over time, this daily cycle of high-carb breakfasts, insulin spikes, and nutrient deficiencies creates a hormonal environment that is hostile to muscle maintenance. It's not uncommon for people who follow these patterns to report feeling sluggish, weak, or stiff in their legs. They may notice that their thighs and calves begin to shrink or lose definition, not because they're losing fat, but because they're losing muscle. And the more insulin resistant the body becomes, the worse this process gets. Insulin resistance diminishes the effectiveness of insulin at the cellular level, meaning the body has to produce even more of it to achieve the same result. This creates a chronic state of hyperinsulinemia, which has been directly linked to sarcopenia, the gradual loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength that occurs with age. But age isn't the only factor at play. This muscle loss can begin as early as your 30s or 40s if your dietary habits are working against you. When the first thing you put into your body each day is a surge of sugar or fast digesting carbs, you train your metabolism to rely on glucose rather than fat or ketones. As your insulin remains elevated for hours following that meal, your body becomes incapable of tapping into fat stores for energy, and with limited available amino acids, it turns to muscle tissue to create the glucose it now craves. This is especially concerning for those who skip meals later in the day or eat infrequently, as the body is forced to break down more muscle for fuel in between carb-heavy meals, further accelerating muscle degradation over time. The cycle becomes even more damaging when you add in the lack of physical activity common in today's lifestyle. Without resistance training or regular use of lower body muscles, insulin has no reason to shuttle nutrients into those tissues. Muscle becomes metabolically inactive, insulin sensitivity drops even further, and fat begins to accumulate around and within the muscles themselves, a condition known as myosteosis. This internal fat infiltration weakens the muscle structure and reduces its capacity to contract and generate force, making even everyday movements feel more tiring. It also leads to increased inflammation, oxidative stress, and mitochondrial dysfunction, which further impair the muscle's ability to grow or regenerate. Most people are completely unaware that their seemingly harmless breakfast choices are setting them up for this metabolic decline. When you consume carbohydrates without pairing them with high-quality proteins or fats, there is no counterbalance to blunt the insulin spike. Unlike protein, which contains leucine and other amino acids necessary for muscle protein synthesis, carbohydrates alone offer no support for muscle maintenance. Instead, they increase the demand for insulin, push the body into storage mode, and suppress the hormonal signals that would otherwise promote muscle growth or repair. Even in cases where people add fruit to their breakfast thinking it's healthy, the combination of fructose and glucose only compounds the insulin load, especially when consumed without fiber or fat. This daily dietary mistake, repeated over weeks, months, and years, creates a perfect storm for metabolic inflexibility, muscle wasting, and fat gain, particularly in the midsection. And since skeletal muscle, especially in the legs, plays a major role in regulating insulin sensitivity, glucose uptake, and energy expenditure, its loss leads to a vicious cycle of worsening insulin resistance, declining physical function, and accelerated aging. The very foods people are told to eat for energy and vitality each morning are ironically the same foods undermining their muscle health, draining their strength, and pushing them into a state of chronic metabolic dysfunction. Your body is an incredibly adaptive and intelligent system, constantly scanning for signals to determine whether it should be in a state of building or breaking down. After an overnight fast, your body is in a delicate metabolic state, often leaning toward catabolism, a state where tissue, including muscle, is broken down to supply the body with energy and vital nutrients. This is especially true if your body is not metabolically flexible or lacks adequate nutrient reserves. But this process isn't irreversible or inevitable. In fact, what you consume in the morning has the power to completely shift this biological direction. When you provide your body with high-quality protein rich in essential amino acids, especially immediately after waking, you send a powerful message to the muscle tissue and to your hormonal system. Stop the breakdown, initiate repair, and begin the process of rebuilding. Protein is composed of amino acids, the building blocks of virtually every structure and function in the human body. Among these amino acids are 9 that are classified as essential, meaning your body cannot produce them on its own and must obtain them through food. Without these, muscle synthesis cannot occur. Of these essential amino acids, one in particular, leucine, plays a pivotal role in activating the mTOR pathway, a key regulator of muscle protein synthesis. When leucine enters the bloodstream in adequate amounts, it acts like a molecular switch, triggering the machinery required to begin repairing and rebuilding muscle tissue. This is especially important in the morning when your body has been in a prolonged fasted state and has already begun drawing amino acids from your muscle stores during the night. If you fail to consume enough quality protein in the morning, or worse, skip breakfast or rely on carbohydrates, you miss the opportunity to halt this catabolic momentum. The body, having gone hours without nourishment, continues breaking down lean mass to meet its metabolic needs. But when you introduce a protein-rich meal early in the day, particularly one that includes complete proteins such as eggs, whey, salmon, or grass-fed beef, you flood the body with the raw materials it needs not only to stop muscle breakdown, but to trigger growth and recovery. This process is especially vital for preserving lower body muscle mass, which tends to deteriorate first with age or metabolic dysfunction. The muscles in the thighs, calves, and glutes require a steady supply of amino acids to maintain their size and function, and they are particularly sensitive to the anabolic signals initiated by morning protein intake. It's not just about eating some protein, it's about getting the right type in the right amount at the right time. High-quality protein sources are those that contain all 9 essential amino acids in sufficient quantities and are easily digestible. Animal-based proteins such as eggs, whey protein isolate, lean meats, poultry, and fish are superior in this regard. For example, just 3 whole eggs contain around 18 grams of high-quality protein, along with key nutrients like choline, B vitamins, and healthy fats that support muscle and nerve function. A single scoop of whey protein isolate can deliver over 20 grams of fast-absorbing protein, including a potent dose of leucine, making it an ideal option for kickstarting the muscle-building process in the morning. These proteins are far more effective than plant-based alternatives when it comes to stimulating muscle protein synthesis, especially in older adults or those recovering from muscle loss. Moreover, the timing of protein intake plays a crucial role. Studies showed that consuming a protein-rich meal within 30 to 60 minutes of waking can significantly impact your body's ability to build and retain muscle throughout the day. Morning is when cortisol, your primary stress hormone, is naturally elevated. Cortisol itself is catabolic. It promotes the breakdown of tissue, including muscle. By consuming adequate protein early, you counterbalance this effect, shifting the hormonal environment from a state of breakdown to one of regeneration. This not only benefits your muscles, but also stabilizes your mood, energy levels, and blood sugar, factors that are all interconnected in the metabolic system. It's important to note that amino acids aren't just structural. They also serve as precursors for neurotransmitters, enzymes, and hormones, all of which play roles in how your muscles perform and recover. For example, tryptophan helps produce serotonin, which affects mood and appetite, while tyrosine supports dopamine, which influences motivation and drive. When these systems are well fed in the morning, you feel more alert, more focused, and more likely to stay active throughout the day, reinforcing the preservation of lean mass through movement and exercise. On the other hand, when you skip protein and opt for carbs, you may feel an initial burst of energy from the glucose, but this is quickly followed by a crash, cravings, and mental fatigue, all of which undermine your physical activity levels and muscle integrity. Another benefit of morning protein consumption is its ability to support satiety and appetite control. Unlike carbohydrates, which spike insulin and often lead to hunger rebound within a few hours, protein takes longer to digest and stimulates hormones like peptide YY and GLP-1, which signal fullness to the brain. And this means you're less likely to overeat later in the day, less likely to snack on insulin-spiking foods, and more likely to stay in a metabolic environment conducive to fat loss and muscle retention. Leucine is not just another amino acid. It is a powerful molecular trigger that plays a central role in one of the most critical processes for maintaining muscle health, muscle protein synthesis. MPS. Among the 9 essential amino acids that the body cannot produce on its own and must obtain from food, leucine stands out as the most potent initiator of the anabolic or muscle building response. In fact, when it comes to stimulating muscle growth or preventing muscle loss, particularly in the legs and other large muscle groups, leucine is the key that turns the ignition. It acts not merely as a building block of protein, but as a direct signal to your cells, telling them to begin the repair and regeneration of muscle tissue. The primary way leucine initiates this process is by activating a signaling pathway in the body called mTOR, mechanistic target of rapamycin. This pathway functions like a switchboard for muscle growth. It senses the availability of nutrients, energy status, and hormonal signals, and then decides whether the body should invest energy in building tissue or conserve it. When leucine levels rise in the bloodstream after consuming high-quality protein, they stimulate the mTOR pathway, effectively giving the green light for muscle protein synthesis to begin. Without sufficient leucine, even if other amino acids are present, this anabolic signal remains weak or inactive, meaning the body stays in a state of muscle breakdown or, at best, maintenance. This is especially relevant in the context of aging, fasting, or recovering from muscle atrophy, where the body's sensitivity to anabolic signals is reduced, and a strong leucine signal becomes even more critical. Leucine's role becomes even more important in the morning when the body has just come out of a fasted catabolic state. Overnight, muscle breakdown naturally occurs due to prolonged nutrient deprivation, elevated cortisol, and lower insulin levels. The body conserves energy by breaking down tissue to support glucose production through gluconeogenesis. When you wake up, your muscle tissue is essentially in a fragile, vulnerable state. By consuming a protein source rich in leucine, you can quickly flip the metabolic switch from catabolism to anabolism, helping the body repair the muscle lost during the night and even prompting growth if the conditions are right. This is particularly essential for individuals who are trying to preserve muscle mass while losing fat, as leucine allows the body to prioritize lean tissue retention even during a caloric deficit. Not all protein sources are created equal when it comes to leucine content. Animal-based proteins are particularly high in leucine, making them more effective at stimulating MPS compared to plant-based proteins. For example, whey protein isolate is one of the richest and fastest digesting sources of leucine, delivering approximately 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine per 25-gram serving, enough to fully activate muscle protein synthesis in most individuals. Whole eggs, chicken, beef, fish, and dairy products also provide robust amounts of leucine, while many plant proteins like beans, lentils, and grains contain significantly less and are absorbed more slowly, often requiring larger volumes and combinations to match the anabolic effect. This difference is crucial when designing a morning meal specifically aimed at halting muscle loss in the legs or elsewhere in the body. It's also important to understand that leucine doesn't just contribute to muscle growth, it helps preserve existing muscle mass, especially under stress. In times of illness, aging, sedentary behavior, or calorie restriction, muscle tissue is often the first to be broken down for fuel. This is particularly concerning for older adults who already face a natural decline in muscle synthesis known as anabolic resistance, meaning their muscles require higher levels of leucine to achieve the same response they had when younger. In these populations, a standard protein intake may no longer be enough. They need leucine-dense meals, particularly in the morning, to overcome this resistance and provide the stimulus required for muscle preservation. Without adequate leucine, even if total protein intake appears sufficient on paper, the physiological outcome may be suboptimal, resulting in continued muscle loss despite best efforts. Leucine also plays a supporting role in insulin function and glucose regulation, two factors closely tied to muscle health. Muscle is a major site of glucose disposal, and insulin sensitivity in muscle tissue is a key determinant of metabolic health. By supporting muscle protein synthesis, leucine helps maintain lean mass, which in turn keeps insulin sensitivity high. This forms a positive feedback loop. Better muscle mass supports better glucose control, and better glucose control supports reduced fat accumulation and lower inflammation. These are all interconnected in the fight against muscle wasting, particularly in the legs, where loss of strength and size can quickly translate into compromised mobility, stability, and independence. In addition, leucine's benefits are amplified when consumed alongside other branched-chain amino acids, BCAAs, like isoleucine and valine, and when accompanied by sufficient energy intake from fats or other macronutrients to support the anabolic process. However, it is leucine that plays the leading role, acting as the central activator of the system. Without it, the entire muscle-building process is weakened or stalled. This is why strategic consumption of leucine-rich foods, especially in the morning, can make a dramatic difference in the long-term maintenance of muscle health, particularly in the lower body, where early signs of muscle wasting tend to show up first in the aging population or in those with insulin resistance. While protein, especially high-quality, leucine-rich protein, is essential for stimulating muscle protein synthesis and halting catabolic muscle breakdown, its power is significantly enhanced when paired with the right kind of healthy fats. This combination isn't just beneficial, it's foundational for creating the optimal hormonal and metabolic environment your body needs to preserve and maintain lean muscle mass, particularly in the legs and other large muscle groups that are often the first to weaken with age or metabolic dysfunction. The idea that fat is harmful or should be avoided, especially at breakfast, is a nutritional myth that continues to undermine the health of millions. In reality, healthy fats are critical modulators of insulin, blood sugar, inflammation, and even the absorption of muscle-supporting nutrients. When consumed strategically with protein, they can help stabilize energy levels, extend satiety, and reinforce the anabolic state that prevents muscle loss throughout the day. Insulin is the hormone responsible for transporting nutrients, especially glucose and amino acids, into your cells. While a moderate insulin response is necessary for muscle building, chronically high or unstable insulin levels are a major contributor to muscle loss and fat accumulation. When you eat a meal high in carbohydrates without sufficient fat and protein, insulin spikes rapidly, driving glucose into the cells and often leading to a crash in blood sugar levels shortly after. This crash triggers hunger, fatigue, cravings, and a stress response that elevates cortisol, which in turn accelerates muscle protein breakdown. This pattern, repeated daily over months and years, promotes muscle wasting, especially in the legs where unused or weakened muscle tissue is quickly sacrificed by the body in the absence of anabolic signals and metabolic stability. Adding healthy fats to your protein-rich morning meal helps slow the digestion and absorption of nutrients, which leads to a gentler rise in insulin and blood sugar. This extended digestion means amino acids from the protein are released more gradually into the bloodstream, providing a steady, prolonged supply of the raw materials your muscles need to repair and grow. It also helps keep you fuller for longer, preventing the mid-morning energy crashes and poor food choices that so often derail blood sugar and promote muscle catabolism. Furthermore, fats are involved in the production of anabolic hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and growth hormone, all of which are crucial for maintaining lean body mass and preventing age sarcopenia. A deficiency in dietary fat, especially over time, can lead to hormonal imbalances that further compromise muscle maintenance and physical performance. Certain types of fats are particularly effective when combined with protein. Monounsaturated fats from sources like avocado, olive oil, and nuts help reduce inflammation and improve insulin sensitivity, allowing your cells to respond more efficiently to insulin's muscle-preserving effects. Omega-3 fatty acids found in fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel have a well-documented role in supporting muscle protein synthesis, improving mitochondrial function in muscle cells, and reducing systemic inflammation that can impair recovery and growth. They even influence the activation of mTOR, the same pathway stimulated by leucine, suggesting a synergistic relationship between healthy fats and amino acids in the regulation of muscle metabolism. Another powerful fat to include in your morning routine is medium-chain triglycerides, MCTs, which are found in coconut oil and MCT oil supplements. Unlike long-chain fats, MCTs are rapidly absorbed and transported directly to the liver, where they are converted into ketones. a clean, efficient fuel source that does not require insulin for energy production. Ketones are muscle-sparing by nature, meaning the body is less likely to break down muscle tissue for glucose when ketones are present in the bloodstream. This is especially important during periods of intermittent fasting, low-carb dieting, or even in older adults who may be more susceptible to overnight muscle breakdown. Consuming MCT oil with a protein-based breakfast, such as eggs, whey protein, or salmon, provides both the structural building blocks and the energetic support needed to protect and preserve lower body muscle mass. The presence of healthy fats also enhances the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins such as vitamins A, D, E, and K, which play essential roles in muscle health, nerve function, and inflammation control. Vitamin D, for instance, is crucial for muscle contraction, strength, and balance. Without adequate fat intake, your body may struggle to absorb this vitamin, even if your diet or supplementation appears sufficient. Similarly, vitamin K is involved in bone and muscle metabolism and works synergistically with vitamin D to support overall musculoskeletal integrity. This illustrates how the bioavailability of critical micronutrients is tightly linked to fat intake, making it essential not just for hormonal and metabolic regulation, but also for optimizing nutrient efficiency in muscle preservation strategies. Equally important is how dietary fats influence brain chemistry, which in turn affects behavior, motivation, and the likelihood of engaging in physical activity, all of which impact muscle maintenance. Fats provide the raw materials for neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine, which drive focus, drive, and neuromuscular coordination. A nutrient-dense breakfast that includes protein and healthy fats sets the tone not just for metabolic control, but also for a neurochemical environment that promotes movement and resistance training, which further strengthens and preserves muscle mass. This is especially important for aging adults whose physical performance and cognitive drive are deeply interconnected.